I'm Elizabeth Mahusai here for this episode of Thinking That Matters, where we look at how we cultivate thinking that matters so that we can live a life that matters. And I'm here with my special guest and very dear friend, Jackie Whitley. And I am so excited for you to learn more about her and what she brings to the business coaching world. And so, Jackie, tell them, give them the 60-second commercial on who you are, what you do, and...
Well, my name is Jackie Whitley. I am a business coach for Southwestern Consulting, and my real passion is to help individuals find their true vision, and then we create realistic goals to reach that vision. Dig deep to find a purpose that's bigger than a paycheck. Work on a mindset of abundance and gratitude, and help create positive self-talk.
I love it. And you know, it's interesting, you said a lot of things about thinking in there, specifically vision, all of that requires really good thinking. So in your, when you think about the vision for your life, right? And I mean, you are where you are, but let's take the Wayback Machine, because we kind of go way back, or at least it feels like we go way back. So if you see her giving me some looks, that's why. So tell us about what you were, because you said that you were passionate about, helping people, realize who they are. When you did a career shift from Fidelity into direct sales, tell us about that, and what had you thinking, I want to shift in what I'm doing?
Well, I worked for a company, or I worked in a data processing shop that was a good old boy shop. So although I worked very hard to promote myself and to learn and to grow within that environment, I was limited because of other people's mindsets. So I realized pretty quickly, I was there for 18 years, but I became a single mom, and although I had a great salary, I needed just a little extra to pay those soccer fees and the dance fees. And so I stepped way out of my comfort zone and started my own, started a direct sales business. And in the beginning, it was just to make an extra $500 a month, because that's really what I needed to help. But quickly, the Lord revealed to me and reminded me of a dream I had had long before that of being a stay-at-home mom. So what I began to do, my mind shift began to change to work hard to bring that dream to fruition as a single stay-at-home working mom. I
love that. I love the phrase a work-from-home mom rather than a stay-at-home mom, right? Because you had a business. And
that's right.
Jackie and I were in that same business together, so we spent a lot of trips together and trainings, training events, working together. You said something that really caught my attention. You said that you worked in a good old boy, environment where you were limited because of others' mindset. I'd like to explore that a little bit, because I think people who listen to this podcast who are really trying to work on their own thinking can possibly be trapped and focused on how other people are thinking, how others are thinking, and they end up allowing it to limit them. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, it was definitely self-limiting for quite a while, until I just, there's got to be something. Well, until I stepped out in faith, and encourage. My courage preceded my confidence of stepping out of my comfort zone and starting a business, a sales business, which I'd never been in sales before. That's when the mind shift started to be revealed to me that I was settling, because they didn't think I was worthy, then I didn't think I was worthy. So I began to settle and just accept things for what they are. You know, just come to work every day and do your job, and then just go home and love on your kids. You know, just let go of dreams or aspirations that I had. I just let go of them. And then I just eventually, because of the personal things I was going through and everything, really became a shell. A version, just an empty shell. I was just doing what I had to do every day. I went to work, went home, took care of my kids, got up the next morning, went to work.
Did it all over again.
Right, without any vision or dreams.
You know, it's interesting. We hear the proverb all the time, without vision, people perish. And Jackie and I were at an event earlier today, and I talked about another way to think about that is without vision, the people cast off restraint. Is it possible that, you know, without vision, the people cast off the pursuit of goals, you know, lifelong goals? And so you shifted and you went into, you courageously stepped in to this direct sales space. As you got there, what were some of the limiting beliefs that we might say plagued you or tried to hinder you in your growth there?
Well, in the beginning, the first 5 years of it, it was, you know, I had a full-time job, that responsibility, you know, and I have a very busy kids. So how can I put something else on my plate? Also, I wasn't really, I felt like I didn't really fit the bill of this persona of what that direct sales business was about, you know, so I didn't look the part necessarily. I wasn't a big, the product that we sold, I didn't use, you know, previous to that. That wasn't something I was really into. It was very simple. And so, you know, it's just all those kind of things coming together to put some roadblocks in front of me that I had to learn how to get over, you know, with really getting deep into the Word, because I knew that God had called me to that, because the way that I'd come into the direct sales business, I'd actually been invited into that business several years prior to that.
Okay.
And I kept, about 7 years, I guess, and I kept just saying, no, that's not for me. I can't do that, you know, whatever. And then the Lord very plainly, very blatantly said, this is the time. You need to just follow me here.
So you got deep in your faith, because one of the things I like to ask is what have you found effective in overcoming limiting beliefs? So when you go back to the direct sales days and, you know, the limiting belief of, I don't really fit the part. I'm a simple person. And we were in a more fashion industry, you know, space. So so you got into the Word. What else was effective in overcoming those limiting beliefs?
Well, seeking knowledge, you know, becoming a industry expert.
A student of your game.
Yes. You know, and practicing, reaching out to others that were successful, and observing and asking for help, you know, with those people that I wanted to be like. You know, I wanted my business to look like theirs, even though I wanted my business to be mine. You know, I wanted it to look like theirs. I wanted to follow in their path, to build and to serve others and to enrich people's lives. That was the basis of that company, was enriching people's lives. And the amazing thing is that as I sought to learn how to enrich others' lives, it enriched mine to know, you know, to unbelievable heights. And but I think one of the biggest, well, probably the most memorable and the biggest turning point was I was in a Bible study, believing God, and when I finally received from him what he had been trying to get me to receive since I accepted him as my Savior, is that, I'm who he says I am. I'm not who anybody else says I am. And what does he say I am? He says, I'm worthy, I'm loved. I am the daughter of a king. And what is the daughter of a king? It's a princess. So when you look in the mirror, and I'm very passionate about that, when you look in the mirror, what do you see? You need to be seeing a princess. And what does a princess look like? She's beautiful. She's adorned with jewels. She just,
I love it. I love it.
she's loved.
Yeah, loved. So after 18 years, that company closed. I mean, we both experienced that. And talk to me a little bit about the next transition in your life to becoming a business coach. What were you thinking when you were at that place of making that decision? Because I know there are people who listen to the podcast who likely they're thinking about making a change. Maybe they're feeling, called to move in a different direction, but they're all up in their head about it. So I would love for you to share about that portion of your, of your shift in career.
Well, like you said, when the business closed at the end of 2020, I walked away from that, not mad, it was sad, but I walked away knowing that I had been blessed beyond measure by that. So I was comfortable, or I knew that the Lord was not finished with me yet. I knew that there was still something that he wanted me to do to finish my career well. So because I wasn't anxious and just, in all of a flurry and, just all these jumbled up emotions when the business closed, I was very settled. I was very calm. Felt very blessed. And so I was able to rest in that for a little bit and just wait on the Lord. And knowing that, like I said, I knew that he wasn't finished with me yet. And then, as I was prayerfully considering, what was the next step, where did he want me to go, what was my purpose going forward, thoughts began to come into my mind about, I wonder what it would take to be a coach of some sort. And then a couple of days later, I was contacted by someone asking me, hey, you should take a look at what I'm doing. And there was something interesting that she said. Okay, so I asked her, why me? Okay, why would you think that I would be a good fit for this? And she said, because she watched me transition out, how did I behave, or what were my actions like when the company announced that it was closing? How did I finish out? And then how did I transition into that waiting period? And that she'd been watching me, and I had no idea, And so that really, in feeling that, this is knowing her and her walk with the Lord and knowing what our connection was, our faith connection is, I knew, this is legit.
So, so I just want to pause. And I know, obviously I was pointing at myself. That was us having that conversation. But it does go to show, though, like the significance of the words we speak into other people.
Right.
So talk a little bit about that. Like for you over the course, and this could be, really over the course of your life, the significance of the words that have been spoken into you and how it's helped shape you in your career and life path.
Well, when I think back over my life, the good and the bad that, drove me to search for truth about myself.
Okay.
And, when you spoke that into me, it just gave me some peace. You know, it was like, okay, you know, here somebody's approaching me to really shift completely what I'm doing into something else. And, you know, at my age, was I really ready to embark on a new career? But yet, the words you spoke gave me, just settled me to, it opened my eyes and my ears to what was coming next. And it, you know, this could be how the Lord wants me to finish my career well. But when I think about things over my life, I think back on my grandmother, who was my spiritual mentor, and all of the positive that she talked into me, spoke into me, because I had a mom that, as a young child, I got spoke to. She spoke positively into me, but then as I got older, there was a lot of craziness, you know, and spoken into me. So my grandmother really balanced that off. But, you know, I think it's just finding, protecting, you know, our mind is the battlefield. Our minds are not our friends. You know, our thought processes are you know, naturally going to go negative. And it's just finding that path in what works for you as far as guarding your mind
Yes.
against the negative talk of the world
Yes.
and those that are around you.
Man, that speaks to the importance of who we surround ourselves with.
Exactly.
And, you know, I know that people have heard, you know, you become like the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And, you know, how significant it is that we are surrounding ourselves with people who speak life, who are really, you know, encouraging and uplifting, and also too sometimes speaking truth in love, but the key there being in love.
Right.
And, you know, I mean, I think I just think that's incredibly important. And, you know, so ultimately Jackie said yes to becoming a business coach. So as you've built a career here and you're working to finish your career of working well, you know, maybe round us out with what have been some of the battles you have fought in your thinking to become the coach that you have become, because she's a great coach and gets amazing results for her clients. So I would love to know a little bit, you know, and you don't have to be exhausted, but maybe 1 or 2 that, you know, that have been true battles mentally, you know, from a thinking standpoint.
Well, I remember when I went through the interview process, a thought that just kept coming to my mind was, I came out of the data processing field. I was in that field for, you know, 30 years, 25 years. And I was in data processing. I began data processing when we had the big mainframes and the big wheel, you know,
Oh, my word.
Yes. You know,
Yes.
cartridges and the, you know, the wheels or whatever, the tape wheels. And so when we needed to clear the mainframe, we dumped the data we backed all of the data onto these tape reels. And so I kept thinking, you know, this mind of mine, these computer banks of mine are full, and I have nowhere to dump the data. And one person, when I went through the interview process, one person heard me say that, and she came back and she goes, you know, that's interesting that you would say that. She goes, shift that mindset a little bit and just think about you're reformatting the data. And
That's
I'm like,
so
I could wrap my mind around that because
that is so good.
You know, because of those thought processes,
Yeah.
because I had been in that field for so long.
But that's okay. Let's just hang out on that just for a moment. I mean, it's the thought was I have no place to dump the data, but the reframe of that thought was reformat the data, maybe reorganize the data,
Right.
or rework how you use the data.
Right.
And that, I think, is incredibly powerful, because we can't go back and change the beginning, but we can change the ending by how we reframe, retool, rework where our thinking as it is right now. And so oh man, that is so good and so important, I think, for people to hear. And it just speaks to my own passion for why thinking matters,
Yes.
and the significance of that. So I always ask every single one of my guests, why do you believe it important to cultivate thinking that matters?
Well, for me, I have a passion for enriching other people's lives through creating these strong visions. But first and foremost, I have a strong passion for women mostly, and men too, but there's a strong pull towards women because I personally struggled with this for so long, is knowing who I am and whose I am. So when you really look at thoughts and things that you struggle with, stopping for a minute and aligning that with truth. And to me, what the truth is the word, and asking, who told you that? When it's say a negative thought, which I got, that got thrown in back at me this week. I said something negative about myself, or, a self-limiting comment. And she immediately came back to me and said, who told you that? Because that's a big thing for me, is really checking yourself.
Yep.
Because we are human and we are going to have negative thoughts. It's just learning how to catch those negative
Yes.
thoughts before they downward spiral into your soul and you begin to believe them.
Yeah.
And I had walked that walk for so long because of a lot of negative talk that was spoken to me in different situations. And when I just slowed down long enough to hear him and to open and receive from him, I'm who he says I am, and begin the journey of truly living into who I am and whose I am. Because I'm not you.
Right.
I don't work like you do. I don't
right.
have a business like you do. My calendar is not your calendar.
That's right.
And when I try to get on someone else's calendar, it's dangerous, it's disastrous, really. And so it's just checking yourself constantly, when you're thinking about things and when you're speaking them out into the universe too, is being cautious about it and lining it up with what real truth is. And just every day, because it's a battle every day.
Yeah, that's so true. So thinking that matters, cultivating thinking that matters is important because what you say about yourself matters. And that what we say eventually, something that you said, I think that is so important, what we say about ourselves, especially the negative, the longer we hang out there, the more that spirals downward. And you said into our soul, and we begin to believe it.
Right.
And that can be our biggest hindrance, our biggest limiter in life and relationship and business. And so I want to encourage you that today, really just think through one or two of the principles that you've heard Jackie share as it relates to cultivating thinking that matters. Because what we know is that when you cultivate thinking that matters, you can live a life that matters.